Parents with nanny cams, what have you caught your babysitter doing? Story 1. What did our nanny do? Oh boy. About 2 years ago, after our son was born with some breathing issues, he has a rare form of dwarfism and his airway is just smaller than most. We were issued a state-funded nursing. A nurse came at night to watch him overnight and make sure he was safe. At the time, he was very stable and really didn't need the nursing, but because he had a trach tube, you legally need the nursing. He had, at the time, a tracheotomy tube. He was a little over 4 months old at the time of this incident. One night, I heard his oxygen monitor beeping, which was not unusual since it frequently malfunctioned. We had been so tired from getting up all the time from the beeping and stupid stuff that the nurses would frequently do, so I didn't hear it for quite a while. These were not highly trained nurses. We've been getting very little sleep for months, very high stress. I walk in and the baby is royal blue and lifeless, an image I will never be able to erase from my brain. The oxygen monitor says 20% oxygen. Normal would be 95, 100%. I yell to my wife, who happens to be a surgeon, and she rushes in and we both start doing CPR on our kid. We call 911. The nurse is standing there, just kind of staring the whole time. She didn't call 911, she didn't call us. I didn't understand what the hell just happened. We do CPR for 15 minutes. No sign of life. The EMT get there and do CPR for another 12 minutes. At the end of the 12 minutes, they get some small signs of life and rush him off to the ER. My wife hops in the back of the ambulance and continues to do life-saving measures for the whole ride. At the hospital, they call a code and do life-saving measures for another 2 hours. He was in and out. When I got to the hospital, they brought over the chaplain and asked us these end-of-life questions. He survived the whole ordeal, but suffered significant right and left-sided brain damage. He is 3 now and making great progress, but I believe he will never be the same. He doesn't talk yet, but is getting close. He says a few words. He's a good kid. Only a few days prior to the incident set up cameras in the room because the nurses seemed a little unsafe, but I had no choice. Long story there. I went back and watched the recorded video. Here's what really happened. The nurse, either on purpose or by accident, had taken the nebulizer machine, an air mister to blow medicine into your airway, and in an attempt to give him his breathing treatment, accidentally, or on purpose, attached it directly to his airway, trach, meaning that instead of gently misting medicine into his airway, he had a strong burst of compressed air being forced into him. It punctured his lung, think of a balloon being blown up and popping, and caused crepitus, air under the skin, and he was without oxygen for over 6 minutes. If it weren't for the nurse, he'd be fine. He was a stable kid who needed a little extra help in the beginning of his life to get to average. He was not a child on life support. His form of dwarfism is limiting, but oftentimes these kids have higher IQs than average, and we don't know why. Unfortunately, that won't be the case for him. If it weren't for my wife being a doctor and constantly saving lives, he'd be dead, without question. She is a professional life-saving master. I knew CPR, but she knew exactly what to do to save his life and not to quit. We had a few extra life-saving things like an ambu bag, and we were able to save his life because of that. We sued the nursing company and won, of course. The money goes into an account to provide services for him for the rest of his life. After we are gone, we want to make sure that someone will take care of him. The nurse did not get her license revoked. She is still practicing. We tried to appeal to the nursing board, but that was the result. Story 2. My friend's bio dad has 4 kids through another relationship and a dog, and my friend told me this story. The kids are a 13-year-old, a 6-year-old boy and girl, and a 2-year-old. They had to go out of town a lot because my friend does swim and always have their sister do it because the 13-year-old liked to play with knives. But she was sick, so they hire a 24-year-old carer. Their resume was good, prior experience, good reviews, etc., so they hire him. When he shows up, he's 6'4", easily 240 pounds, and wearing an Abercrombie beanie, lidded shades, crucifix earring, Atari t-shirt, leather jacket, black and red athletic pants, and Vans. He introduces himself and is nice and polite with excellent etiquette. He begins listing all the things he can and is willing to do. The wife is still nervous though, as one would be, but they leave in an hour so they can't do anything. They have a couple of nanny cams set up, so dad says it's fine, and they leave after introducing him to the kids and the dog, and giving him a short list of chores. They get back and he shakes their hand and leaves. They ask the eldest how it went and he just says fine and goes back to playing video games. Similar response from the 6-year-olds. When they check the cams, they see this. He immediately starts doing the laundry, dishes, and setting out food for the dog. Then he plays several different video games with a 13-year-old, and after some small talk finds out that he loves to play cards. So they play Texas Hold'em for like an hour. For the 6-year-olds, he brushes the girl's hair and helps her do makeup and lets her do his. He has a little sister who loves makeup too. And for the boy, he watches the Star Wars prequels with him and quotes memes. And finally, plays with the baby for like hours, tosses her around and sings Schubert to her. To top it off, he gets McDonald's for everyone, and even slips the baby a few fries, and lets everyone play with the dog in the backyard. After putting the kids to bed, he lays on the couch with their Rottweiler, who usually hates strangers, and falls asleep watching Frasier reruns. They've hired him every time since and always pay him triple his rate, $5.45 an hour. Story 3. I'm gonna answer this from the nanny's side. I nannied my 4-month-old cousin for 9 months, give or take. My aunt and uncle own a bunch of t-shirt touristy shops, so they were really busy all the time. Because of their store success, they're really well off. Beautiful cars, a condo with a private elevator entrance, etc. I also helped manage some aspect of the stores, so we went into the situation as I wasn't family at work, but nanny and part-time store help. No workers or managers knew who I really was, and it was to be kept like that. I wasn't to have workers, new friends, to the family house for privacy reasons. I wasn't to tell them who I was or where I lived. It went as far as I had to remove any information online and make new social medias. I agreed to all of these rules for the safety of my family, no questions asked ever. I was told to not trust these employees, that they knew we were well off and would do anything to steal from us. My aunt and uncle said they never believed them. About 8 months in, my aunt texted me before work asking to meet them in the kitchen. I stopped getting ready and head to the kitchen. Strange, because my aunt and I were super close. She usually comes right into my room. I get out to the kitchen and they are sitting at the counter. My uncle, by marriage, looks at me and says, "So, schedule is changing today. You're going home today." I was so confused and puzzled. My aunt starts bawling her eyes out. "One of my girls perfectly described our ceiling lights in the living room." She barely managed to get out. Again, I was baffled. My uncle proceeds to go on about safety and why he did not want their address out. He said they feared for their lives and would need to move. He then told me I had to leave ASAP. I just stared at my aunt, one of my best friends, waiting for her to say something. I was never even given a chance to tell them I never once had people over, other than a home friend who flew out to see me. They paid for her flight. That it was likely they saw the background from a Snapchat sent or a FaceTime call. I went back to my room, packed up my life into 2 suitcases, called a car service, paid $150, and looked for flights. My aunt ended up knocking on my door, semi-apologizing, offering me a ride to the airport. It was an awkward hour and a half, mostly me quietly crying while sitting next to my cousin. We got to the airport, I said bye to my baby, grabbed my luggage, said thanks for the ride, and walked away. I only see them at holidays now when they come into town. My cousin is 4 years old now. I don't talk to my aunt or her husband. I miss her and her friendship so much. I guess this situation would be considered the worst thing you caught your babysitter doing, although I never did it. Being a nanny is hard. You open your heart and life up to someone, you are extremely vulnerable to their needs. It truly is emotional. Don't nanny for family. Story 4. My grandpa was staying with my parents, but they figured it best to hire the regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task and they were attending a wedding a couple hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple rooms, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, living room, and kitchen. All motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine upon returning home, and their master bedroom cam had never even been triggered before. When they returned, they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered, so they decided to take a look. Cut to footage of my grandpa and the sitter, both naked, aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering while intertwined towards the bed, and then about 20 minutes of banging on my parents' bed. The sitter was about 20 years old and my grandpa was around 70 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his butt off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed, and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out Grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her, and she just apologized and said there was a connection or something to that effect. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, "At my age, you must seize every opportunity." I wish there was audio for the build-up. I lay awake at night sometimes just wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking to get in that sitter's pants. Story 5. Not my story, but a story my teacher, I'll call her Tina, shared about her children and their ex-nanny. So this nanny was a little older lady that had some medical issues, so she needed to bring her medication to Tina's house to take during the day. Tina was fine with this, but asked what type of medications they were, just in case anything bad happened. But the nanny wouldn't tell her and said that it wouldn't happen, so she didn't need to know. Tina found this really weird, obviously, but she really needed this nanny, so she let it be for a little bit. After a few days, her son started complaining about a stomachache, and Tina just thought it was from eating too much candy or something, so she let it go. But then her son started to vomit and had a really high fever. She asked him if he had eaten anything weird, and he said no. Then she called the nanny just in case he didn't remember eating anything weird. On the call, the nanny said that she doesn't remember anything weird, but she wasn't sure. Tina decided to look through the nanny cam just in case he had gotten into something the nanny didn't know about. She didn't see him eating anything weird, but did see that the nanny had spilled her pills all over the floor earlier in the day, which she never mentioned. Then Tina started to worry that her kid had gotten into some medication that she didn't even know the name of. As she was bringing her son to the hospital, she called the nanny and said that he had gotten into some of the spilled pills and just asked what pills she had spilled calmly. The nanny wouldn't tell her. Tina then asked her again, but less calm, but she still wouldn't tell her anything. Her reasoning was that Tina didn't need to know what meds she was taking and that it was too personal. While on the phone, Tina arrived at the hospital and the doctor said he needed to know the medication so he could help the kid. The nanny still wouldn't say anything. The doctor then took Tina's phone and told the nanny that if she didn't tell him what medicine she spilled, that the child would die. The nanny said it was Benadryl. That's what she was so upset about Tina knowing. The kid was allergic to Benadryl. Tina hadn't known this yet, and had eaten so much of it that he got sick. Story 6. I house/dog sit for friends of my parents. The first time I did it, they mentioned they had a security camera by the front door that was motion activated, and I didn't really think anything of it. They were gone for a few weeks. They come home, their 2 giant huskies are happy, I get paid, and all was well. A couple weeks later, my mom calls me, laughing and laughing. My parents had dinner with the friends I dog sit for, and they showed a video to my parents from the front door cam. Apparently, all it showed was me sprinting full speed down the hallway, a dog toy in hand, biggest stupid grin on my face, followed by the 2 huskies running and sliding after me, followed by me, followed by the huskies, over and over and over and over again. Story 7. Me and the wife took her cousin in after he had a nasty breakup with his boyfriend and wanted to move back close to home. We let him live rent-free for 4 months and then started charging $350 a month, all-inclusive. His parents had the gall to shop around for a better rate. We live in a southern U.S. metropolitan area where rent on a 1-bedroom apartment in a Section 8 community is $650 to $700 a month. We live in a nice neighborhood in a 3-bedroom brick ranch house. I thought $350 was a good deal. Anyways, while he was living with us, I was casually noticing things would go missing. Mostly loose cash I had sworn I put in my nightstand, and my weed wasn't lasting nearly as long. It got to the point where I openly asked him and my wife if they were smoking it. My wife consumed, but only a fraction of what I smoked, and they both proceeded to gaslight me, saying I was stressed at work and that's why I was smoking more and not noticing. Fast forward a couple months after this conversation, and I had just bought a small bag and smoked maybe once or twice out of it, and then had to leave on a business trip for a week. My wife was also out of town for work that week, so it was just her cousin in the house. I get home and the bag is almost empty. Keep in mind, I had hidden it away in my nightstand next to my bed, so now I know I'm not crazy. We then bought a Nest camera, and since we are naturally messy people, it was really easy to hide in a pile of clothes on top of my dresser. It took less than 30 seconds after I left the house when my wife was also gone to catch him red-handed. He was sneaking like a commando and looking out the window because he thought I pulled back in the driveway. Aside from the obvious trust violation and all the arguments I had with my wife telling her he was stealing long before we got the camera, was that I couldn't really tell anyone, especially her family. My wife has a good relationship with her aunt, which is why we agreed to take the cousin in, but she would have sided with her son and it would have cost my wife her relationship. So now I have to go to family functions wearing a big fake smile and pretending everything is hunky-dory. I love my wife and I would do it all again if asked, but man, it irks me seeing people abuse my trust then get off scot-free. Story 8. Get a nanny cam. My parents never had one. I will never put my child, if I ever have one, in the hands of a nanny babysitter because of how I was treated as a child. I must have been 5 or 6 years old and I still remember. I'm 30. My brother and I shared a room. When we'd sleep at night, we'd talk to each other a bit whilst in our beds until we slept. For some reason, our babysitter really didn't like that, and she would duct tape our mouths shut, then rip the tape off again and again to make it hurt. It would rip the skin off your lips. Another time when I was eating my food, again at 5 or 6 years old, she slapped me so hard across the face out of nowhere. I remember feeling so shocked and scared. She shouted at me to not chew with my molars and to only chew with my 2 front teeth. I knew that didn't make sense, but as a kid, you put your trust in adults, I guess. Another time, she stuck up her middle finger in my face for a while. She was seething with hate. And yet she was this angelic person in front of my parents. I never told anything about it to my parents, even to this day. My parents weren't really involved with me as a kid. Their relationship was really bad when they had me, so I think they were fed up of everything. They're now divorced. So I didn't really feel I had anyone to turn to, like someone who had my back, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, the lack of involvement by my parents was obvious to my school, and I was bullied like crazy by the faculty there. I don't want to go into details about that, but it was bad, and really affected me as a person. But at the time, you look at them as teachers and adults and feel everything they do must be right. My mom even said she felt my soul was robbed at that school, and she doesn't know why she kept me there. Basically, I've learned, but only realized when I was older, that there are so many adults that are two-faced and are deranged enough to abuse a child, physically or mentally. Way more than we think. They portray themselves as angelic, but behind the parents' back, they are demons. I would never be able to trust another person with my child.